progressive politicians and politically correct assholes. PC Radio. Worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.
thepcradioshow.com. Make sure that you get over there. Very comprehensive website for this low-budget afternoon radio program. But if you have missed any of this program, I know that you're very upset because you, like millions of others, have recently fallen in love with the best program to ever relentlessly pursue truth, which is in its infantile state, but you have discovered it. Just like millions of others who listen to us on and watch us in the OpsLens app. By the way, we'll talk about that app. Extremely comprehensive app. We have to find other ways to get to the truth and get the truth out there because God knows the media is shutting it down. 3 kids killed on the streets of Minneapolis in the last week. No, 3 kids shot on the streets of Minneapolis in the last week. Richard, did you hear about it before yesterday?
I certainly did not. Man, what an outrage. I'm going to tell you, I was extremely, extremely upset after our conversations with certain
And I want to stop.
individuals
Hold on. I want to stop you right there, okay? I want you to be very careful here, all right? Because, yes, we do have very, very reliable sources inside of the Minneapolis Police Department. And we did have a conversation in a parking lot last night with one of these sources. And
Yep.
I want you to continue with that, but I want you to be very careful about, mentioning precincts and things like that. The last thing we want to do is get a cop jammed up.
I agree.
So continue with what you were saying.
Just that all of the stories of things that happened when certain other things happened.
Are you able to actually talk about this?
Well, I don't know, man. It's the failed leadership, not only in Minneapolis, but all over the country, as these assholes sit on their little high perches in the ivory towers of protection from everything that's really happening on the streets, and then just blatantly set your cops up for failure.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane to me. What kind of person, especially a chief or a superintendent or whatever the hell they're called all over this country, at one point you were a cop out on the street. You were out there fighting the fight, or at least you should have been. And now that you get a white shirt and some stars on your lapel or whatever the hell it is, you sit behind a desk and you tell people they're wrong. And maybe they are wrong. Cops are humans too. Sometimes they make a mistake. But for you to put them out into harm's way every single effing day and then not have their backs when something goes wrong, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, is complete bullshit. And they all should be ashamed of themselves, and they should strip them of all their power and put them out on the street as a rookie cop.
Watch your
with
mouth.
No help. What?
Watch your mouth. So Richard and I were having a conversation last night with a cop in Minneapolis. The cop was there, just like every other cop was there the night that, Fit hit the Shan down there in the 3rd precinct, and the precinct was burned. These guys were all set up and ready for this, and there were barricades set in a particular fashion that would have been basically impenetrable. And these cops were told by command staff to remove these barriers, to take these partitions down, as if it was the opinion of this particular cop, who, by the way, is, this is no rookie, okay? This guy's been around.
Right.
And the opinion of this particular cop is that this was on purpose, that it was almost predetermined that should something like this happen in this city, that the result was going to be to allow the criminal thugs to overtake that department, that precinct, and to allow it to burn. And that the preconceived decision was that the cops were not going to be protected. It's a disgrace. It's a total sham. And it's not only going on in Minneapolis. Jacob Fry, the failed mayor, worse than Betsy Hodges, who was voted and actually deemed to be by a credible magazine one of the worst mayors in the history of the country. This is being echoed in Wisconsin by Tony Evers, the communist, who incited riots in Wisconsin in the wake of the shooting of Mr. Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He did call in the National Guard, but then he incited rioting with using racially charged statements and calling this a merciless killing. We know the facts are that he wasn't complying with law enforcement, that he struggled with law enforcement, that they used neuromuscular incapacitation to try to use less lethal force to stop him from his tirade and his violence, which was ineffective. We know that there's witness accounts that say the police are yelling at him, "Drop the knife." We know that we've seen a picture of him holding what looks to be a knife in his hand. We see the officers try hands-on techniques to get him, to keep him, to prevent him from getting into this vehicle where, by the way, there are 3 kids whose lives are at that point the responsibility of the officers to protect, regardless of whose kids they are. There's other witness accounts that say that Blake said he had a gun in the car and that he was going to, quote, take care of this, on his own. And then he wasn't putting a leg up, like scooting into the car like he was going to get away and drive it. He was diving in with his hands.
Right.
When he was shot. I would think that the Wisconsin Department of Justice would tell us if they found a gun in that car, but I don't put anything past law enforcement agencies these days. They've been politicized at the highest levels, and that's evident by the facts that we have here in Minneapolis as it relates to George Floyd. There were tapes that had to be leaked. Go to Britain, to British media, and then come back here to the United States before we were able to see it. And then, the officials here, their hands were forced until they had to release it after it had already been leaked. We know that Keith Ellison knew what was on those tapes. We knew that Michael Freeman's office at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office knew what was on those tapes. We knew that Medaria Arredondo, we know that he knew what was on those tapes, the chief of police in Minneapolis. We know that Jacob Fry was aware of that tape and knew what was on it. We know that they withheld that tape and didn't release it for the public to see what was really going on. And I'm not saying that it exonerates Derek Chauvin, because I don't have all the facts. There hasn't been a trial yet. The evidence hasn't been submitted for a jury review. There hasn't been any convictions. A judge hasn't handed down any sentencing. The presumption of innocence is taken away from people that are in Derek Chauvin's position, and he is convicted in the court of social media and popular opinion by people who call themselves anti-fascists, but are fascists in every sense of the word. We're going to destroy everything until we get our way. We're going to tear down statues. We're going to use violence and force, carnage and destruction, looting and robbing, stealing and maiming and killing until we get our way. Live rounds being shot in Kenosha last night. 3 people killed on the streets in broad daylight before sunset. 3 kids in Minneapolis in the last week have been shot. 3 of them. One of them, a 13-year-old girl who was shot in the brain. She's not dead yet by last reports, but by all senses of the word, she's circling the drain. Where are the Black Lives Matter people there? By the way, 3 black kids, shot in the north side community of Minneapolis. Where is BLM now?
It wasn't the police that shot him.
How many buildings have been burned down in her name? What is her name? Where are the hashtag say her name people at?
Yeah, she can't breathe. Oh, boy.
The hypocrisy is astounding, and it all comes from liberal progressive radicals, and it's driven by the media. I haven't done enough research to really get into this today, but the Star Tribune ran a series of stories about the Umbrella Man. The Umbrella Man was the guy who He was donned the Umbrella Man title. This is the guy that was originally shattering all the windows down at the AutoZone before it went up in flames. And he was labeled as one of the biggest inciters down there in 3rd Precinct, Minneapolis on the south side, just blocks away from where George Floyd had his interaction with police, where the media told you that he died, but that's been debunked and proven to be inaccurate by the medical examiner's report that states that he was alive for more than 30 minutes after he arrived at HCMC, the Hennepin County Medical Center. So he didn't die there on the street. He wasn't lifeless there on the street. He was very much alive until 30 minutes after he got to the hospital. I saw a report this morning that the medical examiner concluded that there was a lethal or fatal amount of fentanyl in Floyd's system. Well, I'm not saying that fentanyl killed him, but the medical examiner is. The hypocrisy of the media is astounding. Back to the Star Tribune. They ran this series of stories on the Umbrella Man. Do you know what the first one was, Richard? I don't know if you were following the Star Tribune during this time, but the first story that they ran about the Umbrella Man was that he was an off-duty St. Paul cop that came down there and, yeah. I mean, this is, and it's not hard to find this stuff. Go Google it after the show today, and we got to start. I really want to get into this one. I want to follow up on this. Because then, after that, and I'm trying to figure out the timeline, but I know that shortly after that then there was a white woman who converted to Islam, a Muslim woman over there in Stillwater, Minnesota, at some malt shop, who had like 25 pictures online of, I believe it was the Hells Angels. And if it wasn't the Hells Angels, I apologize. Okay, let's just do this. It was a motorcycle club, okay? One of the 1% group motorcycle clubs. And she was there with her 7-year-old child or whatever, and she posted like 25 pictures of herself being intimidated by these guys who were looking at her as if they knew that she was a white woman who had converted to Islam, right?
Right.
So now they're white supremacists, and these white supremacists are now they're now being tied in by the Star Tribune, then picks up this story a couple of weeks later and runs it and goes with it about this narrative, how this woman was bullied. Well, I will say this. From what I know about biker clubs, they're not out there looking for a bunch of attention. Okay? It's known that they it's alleged that they make their money in dealing with illegal methods of doing so. The drug trade, possibly prostitution, guns, whatever. And they're just like any other gang in the sense that they intimidate basically just based on presence in numbers. But they're not out there like just going into bars and recklessly pulling guns out and calling people the N-bomb and drawing attention to them. These people don't want contact with the police.
Yeah, they're not staring down women with their young kids just to make themselves feel better and scare somebody. That's ridiculous.
Do you really think that a motorcycle club is going into the malt shop in Stillwater, Minnesota, and staring down a white woman and her 7-year-old child? Absolutely not. But the Star Tribune doesn't.
They like ice cream too.
The communist Star Tribune doesn't care if there's any validity to the narrative. They're just going to go with it. Because it's divisive, because it's racist, it's racially charged, and they can blame somebody, which is the new narrative. It's got to be somebody else's fault. And so then the Star Tribune continues, and then they go back to the Umbrella Man. Now he wasn't a St. Paul cop. Now he's a white supremacist. Okay? And so we're going to get to that because we're relentless seekers of the truth on this program, and we're going to get to following up on that timeline just for if no other reason, just to illustrate exactly how blatantly biased the media is and how shamelessly liberal progressives like Jacob Fry, like Tim Walz, will perpetuate a narrative and basically just make it up. Perpetuate isn't even the right word because that would be insinuating that there's some sort of validity to the argument. They will make something up completely and then run with it. And then when it's
not even present their bull crap in a manner in which you're going to try to convince somebody to believe it. It's just blatant bullshit, and people are buying it.
Watch your
and
mouth.
the problem in my opinion is, as time goes by, it's the leadership, of course. I mean, we've been talking about it over and over and over again, and it's just more and more clear. The more people you talk to that are boots on the ground, that are fighting the fight, it's a failure in leadership. And these people like Mayor Fry, that pencil neck sissy son of a bitch, he should be stripped of his powers and put out there for everyone to whoop his ass in the square.
Watch your mouth.
It's crap. It's so frustrating.
You're inciting violence. You're
good.
Terrorist.
I hope I do incite violence. And I wish even more that all these cops would go to City Hall and lay their badges on the stairs and then tell him, you take care of it, sir. Chief Arredondo, you go police these cities. If you're going to tell me I'm doing my job wrong every day, then you go do it. And I wonder how many times in the last 2 months these police officers have been taken aside or in a group by their command staff and somebody tell them, hey, you guys are doing a great job. Or are they sitting in roll call every day, hearing about the mistakes they made, what they should be doing better? We need to do this, this, and this, and this better. How about you say, hey, I know that you're up against a lot. Good job. And I don't know that that's not happening, but from the morale of the police officers all around the state of Minnesota that we've come into contact with, it doesn't seem like it's happening.
I don't want to get too much into cop stuff today.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. No,
heavy on my mind.
I understand, and it's heavy on mine too. There's no bigger supporters of law enforcement than the two of us right here. And we'll be the first ones in the fight with any cop who's out there fighting with somebody, getting their ass whipped. We'll be the first ones to support the actions of police. And here's why. Because if there's a million cops, because that's the rough number, okay, 890,000, whatever. But for all intents and purposes, and for the purpose of easy illustration, if there's a million cops, how many contacts do you think there are by law? And I'm sure we can find the statistic if they're not lying to us. But how many contacts do you think there are? Okay, so let's just say that every officer, so let's just say a quarter of the officers are working in a shift, right? So you have 250,000 roughly officers working in one shift. How many contacts do you think each officer makes? I mean, let's just say 5 contacts per shift, right? So you have 1.25 million contacts in every shift. There's 3 to 4 shifts in a day, depending on how the department. I mean, so you have literally millions of contacts with citizens every day. And I would venture to guess that some of them are black. I mean, I know I'm really jumping on the end of the stick of assumption there, but. And when there's an altercation with a black guy that turns deadly, we burn everything down. And it doesn't matter if there's any substantive value. It doesn't matter if there's any evidence. It doesn't matter if facts don't matter. And it's all politically driven by the hypocritical left. And I have said off the air over the last few days that, and I've said since the beginning of this show that I have Democrat friends, and I've said since the beginning of this show that if I were a Democrat, I would be really pissed off and angry and live a miserable life also. Because I live in this world of lies and hypocrisy, and I've been lied to. And I've said that if I was a black person, I'd be really pissed off because Democrats hold me hostage and only talk to me once every 4 years and still try to enslave me and take my vote for granted. And if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, and insult my intelligence and basically call me too stupid to make my own decisions up for my own self. And the hypocrisy continues with it. And so I said I didn't want to continue harping on being the echo chamber, the Sean Hannity of political talk radio, by continuing to just blast liberal Democrats. But it becomes so hard not to when they shamelessly are out here doing the same thing over and over and over again, and regurgitating this nonsense ad nauseum until you just want to vomit every day, and it makes you want to punch down. And I've always been taught not to punch down. It delegitimizes your platform. It makes you sound ignorant. It makes you look bad to punch down. It's why the president doesn't.
But who is sticking up though for these guys that are getting their butts handed to them, and have to go home every day? Not just cops, but people in general. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't be punching down, but who's talking about it? Who's talking about the working man? Like you mentioned last week, the farmer shoveling shit in the field. Who's talking about him? Everybody else is talking about all this other crap that doesn't matter. So maybe we just need to talk about it.
The police are everything that's wrong with America. We need to defund them. We need to disband them. We need to cancel them. We need to replace them with whatever the term of the day is, citizen public safety liaisons that are unarmed. That'll go over well. That'll really work. I can't wait till the first time one of these liaisons, and it's really outside of my character to wish harm on somebody. Mm-hmm. But I can't wait until the first time that one of these liaisons goes to a domestic disturbance and there's a 6'8", 4% body fat dude on PCP beating the shit out of everybody on the block. What do you think? What do you think this jerk off is going to do? He's going to call.
I bet it's already happened.
He's going to call the cops. But being that the police are bad, we as in the Lori Lightfoots of the world still have them protecting us. We're going to tell you that the police are everything that's wrong with America, but we're going to be surrounded by them as they protect us. That's fascism in the greatest sense of the word. It's hypocritical propaganda. It's lies meant to fool you, and you're eating it up. Tolerance. There's another point of hypocrisy from the left. Tolerance. They've spent the last 4 years crying, whining, screaming, yelling, and doing everything that they can to sabotage a presidency. That doesn't tell me that they're very tolerant. Racism. White man bad, orange man bad, Donald Trump bad, Donald Trump racist. Anytime you disagree with somebody, you're racist. But then the biggest racist of them all is Joe Biden, who takes the Democrat or the black vote at automatically it's going to be a Democratic vote. It's the most racist thing I've ever heard in my life. And then you watch the contrast between the DNC and the RNC.
Yes.
The message of hopelessness and American apologists and the end of the world in 2020. If Donald Trump gets reelected, we are at the end of the world. The aliens are coming. The murder hornets. Whatever happened to the murder hornets? Because I feel like we skipped the murder hornets. The pandemic, the hurricanes, the racism, the violence, the destruction, the burning. The end of the world is going to come. Hopelessness, helplessness, negativity, and all bad for America. That was the message of the DNC. Yeah. And it was spoken by Hollywood liberal elitists who have walls around their homes and are protected by armed men, most of them off-duty cops, or even working cops if they're politicians.
Isn't that weird?
And then at the RNC, you have a message of hope, getting things back on the right track, progress, positivity, unity. You have black guys, the Democrat senator from Georgia, and now he's being called an Uncle Tom because he walked away as a Democrat and is now a Republican. There's like 3 or 4 black Democrats out there that are talking on behalf of the president and the RNC because they've walked away from that BS and they're now Republicans, or at least on the Republican ticket. It's absolutely absurd. We're going to talk more about the DNC versus the RNC with Brett Kokinadas coming up in just a few minutes. My name is Stu Peters. That guy is Richard Leonard. More PC Radio right after this.
House votes. We will not stop. Any Republican senator is part of the cover-up.
What the f***?
Impeachment.
Impeachment.
This is madness.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute.
Hey, it's Stu Peters for Johnson Jewelers. I am lucky enough to live in Minnesota. Well, lucky because I'm close to Johnson Jewelers, who's at 783 Radio Drive in Woodbury, so it's a short jaunt for me to go over there. I can get my jewelry cleaned, or I can salivate from all the awesome stuff that they have in their display cases. A lot of it is custom. It's all custom. Watches, pendants, rings, necklaces, whatever you can imagine. And that's what makes Johnson Jewelers the coolest, because yeah, I can go in there and I can spend some money, and I'm sure that they'll appreciate that, and buy that piece that's right there in the case, or hey, I like that ring, can you resize it for me, or that bracelet would look really great on this ruggedly handsome arm of mine, and they'll go ahead and hook me up. But what makes Johnson Jewelers special is their ability to create custom pieces for you. So if you have that stone, or if you have that diamond that was left behind from grandma or grandpa, and you want to do something special with it other than keep it locked away in a safety deposit box, a real quick visit to johnsonjewelers.com and a couple of emails sent back and forth and a phone conversation, and you can have that stone or whatever it is that you have, that pendant, that crest, turned into something custom that you'll be proud to wear and keep grandma and grandma or grandpa or whoever it is closer to you for the rest of your life, and wear that. And it's quality stuff, so it's going to last the rest of your life, and then you're going to pass it down to your kids, and so on and so forth. Johnson Jewelers. They're in Woodbury, Minnesota, but if you can't get there, we understand. So visit them online at johnsonjewelers.com or give them a call at 651-735-4400. johnsonjewelers.com, johnsonjewelers.com.
Twitter blew up.
More offensive than a presidential tweet.
Russia, China, Japan, Mexico, all countries will respect us far more than they do under past administrations.
PC Radio with Stu and Rich. Mojo 50 Radio.
And iHeartRadio, and the OpsLens app, and Spreaker, and Spotify, and in the iTunes store, and wherever else you can go to listen to tremendously handsome, ruggedly good-looking men opine on, and opine intelligently on other unintelligent, ignorant stuff. I don't know. We were on kind of a rant during that first part of the segment, and the first segment of the show, and I've got to apologize for kind of letting that thing go off the tracks. It happens, though. I mean, Richard, you're a human, I'm a human, and some of this stuff, it's hard not to get angry. It's hard to sit back and watch this stuff happen to good people. It's hard to watch it happen to the police. It's hard to watch it happen to members of the black community on the north side of Minneapolis and over on the south side and everywhere else, where they're taken advantage of. And this popular opinion inside of politics is that we need to get rid of the police. But then you go onto the street and you ask these people in these communities, do you think we should get rid of the police, defund, disband? And resoundingly, the answer is no, hell no. I'm losing too many of my friends and my family, to this violence. We need the police. But somehow we live in a system where 7 people on a city council are able to determine the fate of the safety of these communities that are going to suffer the most, while they sit there and say that they're doing it for these people.
Yeah, and it's not just the years we've been roaming the streets arresting people. It's cops, of course, business owners, just the old school guys that sit on the corner and play dominoes. Watching them go through all of this. I mean, how many of the little gas stations that we stop at for a coffee to say hi? We had Bobby on last week. All these people that depend on the community to feed their own families, and it's all gone. It's very frustrating.
It's burned. It's gone. And they won't come back. And I don't blame them. They're taking their insurance money and they're getting the hell out of here. We heard from somebody else in Minneapolis that some guy bought a bar for like $30,000 or $50,000 was his total investment, that he bought this bar and he lost it. Well, $30,000 or $50,000 was probably his life savings from some other career that he had. He was tired of pushing papers for the man. And he had it was part of the American dream, small business, the backbone of the American economy, the freedom to work for myself, the freedom to succeed or the freedom to fail. It's part of the American equality system that we have here that continues to be ignored. And then we continue to be told it doesn't exist. And all of that rhetoric comes from one side of the aisle. And I've said before that I'm going to stop bashing one side and try not to delve into this identity politics too much. And Democrats are bad and Republicans are good, because that's just not true. It's not true that all Democrats are bad, and it's not true that all Republicans are good. There's a lot of crappy Republicans out there too. Independent thinkers, free thinkers, critical thinkers is what we encourage you to be. Don't just get out there and vote for somebody because you've been told for generations that that's what you're supposed to do. That is the very definition of slavery and racism, especially when it comes to the black vote, that has been taken for granted by the Democratic Party forever. Joe Biden, the biggest racist on the planet, famously recently said, "You don't vote for me, you ain't black." Come on, man. It's... What about the Nancy Pelosi thing where her and Chuck Schumer are wearing the kente cloths and kneeling? We briefly touched on that yesterday. As if pandering to these people is good enough, you're insulting their intelligence and you're saying, you're stupid. You got to vote for me because you depend on me, and you're stupid. You're stupid enough that you're going to buy this crap, and I can just go do this little charade and then talk crap about the police and how Trump is a misogynist racist, and he's anti-immigrant because, building this wall. I mean, real leaders don't build walls, they build bridges and all this other crap, but they live behind walls and they're protected by cops.
And it's you mentioned it, that the people are buying this stuff. And so I was having a conversation yesterday real quick with somebody who's very near and dear to my heart, and was telling me that, and agree with us wholeheartedly, very staunchly agree with the things that we talk about on this show, and was saying that they have a friend whose 15-year-old child has all over their social media that Jacob, what was his name in Kenosha?
Blake.
Jacob Blake's a hero, and there's no reason that these cops should have shot him. And I hope that they erect a memorial for him and all this other shit.
Yep. And that's the new thing, man. And it's going to only continue to get because here's the deal. It's too late. The highest levels of law enforcement have been politicized. Chiefs and highly decorated veteran officers are bowing literally on the ground at the feet of the very people who are trying to hurt them, who hate them, who curse them, and who will spit at them or kill them. And so the memorial thing, you want to memorialize a criminal thug and call him a hero? That's fine. Real heroes get propped up by people who are critical and free thinkers. Real heroes, like the guy who wears the gun and the badge and runs directly at gunfire to protect somebody he's never even met. So don't punch down on that, Richard. Don't reduce yourself to the level of ignorance and allow stuff like that to get to you. And here's why. Because people who think like that are too far gone to reason with.
At 15 years old.
Too far gone. And that is a product of systemic indoctrination, because educators across the country have adopted this theory of social justice in the name of being an apologist for your whiteness, and in the name of racism, and in the name of equality, but ignoring the fact that they have a history book right over there, just steps away, that will objectively depict American events in our history that made us the first free nation, the melting pot of the world, where millions of people come annually to escape oppression and racism and dictatorship. But can we talk about that? No, we don't talk about that, because instead we want to talk about this theory of racism and social injustice. There you are. I got you back. And did we lose Kokinadas too? Probably. He was holding over here. Brett Kokinadas supposedly is on the phone. We're going to see if he is. Brett Kokinadas was recently a congressional candidate in New Mexico. He's been a technology entrepreneur for over 20 years in communications, mobile software, and computer vision technologies. As a founder of the New Mexico Democrats for Democracy, he walked away from the Democratic Party and was a recent Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. Please tell me that you're on the phone.
We're here, Stu. We're here.
The technical difficulties continue here at PC headquarters, and that is at no doubt the responsibility of Intern Boy, who is a complete failure of everything that he's ever put his hands on in the history of his life, which is why he has no name. He has not earned the right. Speaking of earning the right, I don't know if you heard what we were talking about while we were on the phone or while you were on hold there, and we kind of got off track again because Richard continues with his emotional outbursts on this program. But, you have kind of the same thing going on in New Mexico. There was an active shooter in your city or in your state just yesterday, and within minutes or hours of this active shooter, we're talking an active shooter that police confronted and heroically gunned down, and then almost immediately thereafter, Black Lives Matter, they're protesting.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And my tweets and my post about that was, well, what does this movement expect APD to do? It was actually the Bernalillo County Sheriff that responded to it. And, thankfully, they were out there risking their lives to protect other New Mexicans, from that active shooter. But absolutely right. Just after they were able to handle the situation, BLM showed up and decided to protest. It's just baffling. And that's not the first instance of that in this state. We've had other issues happen in Albuquerque as well. Our crime is through the roof, and really, we have big crime problems. So there has to be a balance. I understand horrific things happen. There are bad individuals in every industry, in every profession, and things can be done to do that, but we can't take the stance of that we don't need a police force. That's just unreasonable.
Was the media somewhat respectful with that? I'm sorry, Richard, I'll let you get in here, but was the media somewhat respectful with that, or did they frame this then again as something racially charged?
Well, it was interesting because this particular incident that happened yesterday, the local news was pretty respectful and professional about the issue, though they did critique a tweet that came out about another incident that came from the chief of police from APD, which then the chief of police said that he wasn't aware of the tweet and retracted it. So you do, like you guys were talking about, where you have law enforcement and other elected officials kind of pandering to the movement. That's happening, and I don't think that's happening from all levels. In this case, it was an issue between the social media manager at the police department sending out a tweet that wasn't in line with the chief of police's position.
Well, and so it's interesting that this kind of came up organically because this is one of the questions that I had prepared for you. But out of the Albuquerque Journal, an article published yesterday about this active shooter, and this will just go to show you how these protesters and these BLM folks view this. A man by the name of Arthur Bell was quoted. He is the leader of Black New Mexico movement. And he said to the reporter, "We don't know the person that y'all shot, but he's a citizen just like us. We're out here because we give a damn, because we know how his family feels. We understand that unlike y'all, he's probably not going home tonight. So you don't know who this guy is. You don't know why the cop shot him. All you know is that the police shot a man, and you're going to protest it, not knowing that this gunman fired shots towards deputies and his backdrop was a residential area."
Exactly. Yeah, and that's my question to them is how do you respond? How do they want police to respond in that situation in an effective manner? I mean, we've seen shootings happen in public spaces, across history, in churches and buildings, out in public in Las Vegas. And if we don't have law enforcement to come protect and diffuse the situation, what is the public's response to that? How do we deal with that? How do you want to live in a world where you can go on the street and someone's going to be firing shots and there's no one that's going to come and stop them? Because that seems to be the course that these movements want to go.
Yeah. I'm looking at the tweet that I think you were talking about that was retracted or deleted by the Albuquerque Police Department. The senseless shooting of Jacob Blake once again shows why our community and communities across the nation are seeking justice and change. On behalf of APD, I offer my sympathy to Jacob Blake's family and his children who witnessed this disturbing act. I sincerely hope he makes a full recovery. Chief of Police Mike Geyer. He said that he had no knowledge of that tweet and then retracted it, but he authored the tweet. His own agency frequently gets accused of bad shootings, so he decided to blame an officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin for lawfully shooting an armed sex offender. He's going to have a real problem on his hands the next Albuquerque police-involved shooting. And what is he going to say then? If I was an Albuquerque cop, I'd be very concerned about that and about him walking away from me, throwing me under the bus, firing me, and then allowing criminal prosecution to happen, even in the most justifiable use of force situation if it involves a black person.
Absolutely.
And what's really interesting, too, is that the sheriff in Bernalillo County, which Albuquerque is part of, is a Democrat sheriff. He was invited to the White House by the president to talk about their operations, about sending federal resources and staff to cities. Albuquerque was a recipient of that.
And the individual sheriff got just scrutinized by the police department and other elected officials because that didn't align with the Democrat agenda. Albuquerque is the second highest city in the country for violent crimes. I mean, we have car thefts, we have murders. Another gentleman went to the White House who was a citizen. His wife was shot in the driveway on the way to the gym.
We have
just randomly.
Yeah, in Minneapolis, we were talking at the first part of the show that there were 3 kids that were shot. 3 black kids were shot just in the last week in Minneapolis. You don't hear about them. You don't know their names. Where is the hashtag say her name for the 13-year-old girl who was shot in the brain, who I believe is hooked up to life support and will never be the same again if she makes it? She's circling the drain. Where is the political group Black Lives Matter? How many buildings are going to be burned down in her name? Why are people still not awake or woke to this cancel culture, to this fascist movement? Why are people buying this? This is blatant hypocrisy. Do you have any idea why people are actually believing this narrative when it is so shamefully right in your face when a black person is killed, even in a justifiable use of force like an active shooter? Hello. He's going to shoot a bunch of people, you idiots, and you're protesting that. But you claim that Black Lives Matter is your message, but that black people are being gunned down in the street. Kids are being killed. There were 4 in a week in Chicago. There were 3 shot in the last week in Minneapolis. We don't hear about it on the media, and Black Lives Matter is completely absent. Brett, why are people not seeing through this?
Well, I think, and I'll just kind of distill this down, right? So
you work in radio. What happens when you put your microphone too close to a speaker?
you get that feedback loop, and it starts echoing and getting louder and louder and more distorted. And I think that's what's kind of happened with this movement. You know, we took one situation, which we know the truth of that situation, and then liberal media got a hold of it and said, well, here's an opportunity. And they keep projecting that message over and over and over again. And I think that the true intent gets distorted over time. And I think that's what we're seeing. You know, perfect example yesterday in Albuquerque, like you said. You know, here's a legitimate, justified situation that the police had to deal with deadly and lethal force, and we have Black Lives Matter out there protesting. I think that's where part of the issue is happening. But we can see what's happening in Kenosha. I've seen videos, I'm sure you've seen videos, about this younger, disconnected generation where they're not necessarily responsible for themselves. They're not, they've never owned a business. They've never started a business. Probably none of them have actually bought anything of any significance on their own. And they're out destroying businesses that families or individuals have worked, their entire lives or generations to build. And they just say, well, you got insurance. It's no big deal. I'm angry. How is that justified?
So I'm just reading right now, violent riots. They're actually calling them riots now instead of peaceful protesters. This is being reported by some news outlet there. Violent riots by Black Lives Matter and Antifa extremists in Kenosha, Wisconsin, late Tuesday evening reportedly came to a preemptive halt when armed vigilantes, who may have possibly been militia members, opened fire on the extremists, killing 2 and injuring at least 1. Gunfire erupting on American streets. This is unprecedented. We've never seen times like these. Is there any hope for our future?
Well, in our last radio interview that we did, we talked about this election cycle.
We've had concerns about the election, the legitimacy of the election, if the election is even going to happen,
and other issues, too, as far as who gets elected. The real issue here is everyone's kind of focused on the federal level, their congressmen, their senators, the president, vice president, and such, and we do hope that President Trump is successful. The issue that we see is that regardless of who wins this election, you're going to have, I think, significant upset on either side of the aisle, and when I mean that, either side of the social movements. Mm-hmm. The other real focus should be putting emphasis on our local elections. Because like here in New Mexico, and we've talked about this too in the past, it's great to have a president that supports America, but the president really has very little daily effect on local issues in this state. And I'm talking about law enforcement issues. I'm talking about local economic issues. We're talking about, these COVID restrictions that are decimating our economies and local businesses. And that's why people need to get involved. When you talk about these Democrats that constantly vote Democrat because they've always been a Democrat and they don't know why, I put out a message yesterday. I said, you keep voting Democrat and yet you're unhappy with what you're getting. You're living in a completely controlled blue state. So stop the insanity and try something else. Try something different.
You saw part of the DNC. I'm sure some of the RNC. The message at these things is completely opposite each other. One is a message of negativity and hopelessness. We live in a racist America that owes the world an apology, and people have been oppressed for 400 years and all of this other nonsense. And Biden was able to muster up this 15-minute thing that I'm sure was rehearsed by him and his handlers for many, many days leading up to this, probably dozens of times. And then you see on the RNC side, you see real black Americans who have stories where they grew up in a broken home and they failed out of their freshman year and they thought football was going to be their whole life. And then they were told and raised by his mother in a impoverished area of his city and knew what real racism was about in the South and overcame all of that adversity and now is a U.S. senator. And he left the Democrat Party and he went to the GOP side like you did. His reasons were because, real racism exists in the Democrat Party. We've seen that. I mean, by the very famous statement given by Joe Biden recently, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black, insinuating that black people are too stupid to decide on their own who they're going to vote for, and just illustrating that they take the black vote for granted. But they're losing that, much like they lost you. You were a Democrat. You were part of the walk-away movement, and not only were you a Democrat, you were raised that way for a very long time, and not only did you walk away, but you actually walked away and then tried to make a difference by running as a congressional candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. It doesn't get any more representative of the truth than that. I mean, you recognized what was going on, and what you're dealing with in New Mexico is synonymous with what all of these other Democrat-run or liberal, progressively run cities are going through with restrictions as far as even COVID is concerned. You have a governor there who has completely abused her unilateral authority and continues to do so by desecrating and damaging businesses. Paint us a picture of what's really going on down there and what we should know about New Mexico at a first-hand glance.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just want to kind of touch on some of the things that you mentioned about the RNC too, and the Black American vote. You have other candidates out there echoing the same messages, like Kimberly Klasick or Classic. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name.
Klasick,
out of Baltimore.
Yep.
She's out there advocating for Black Americans in her district, saying that we've been repressed, we've been held down.
Yep.
There's a lot of documents that show that, and that's kind of the same nature in New Mexico. New Mexico is a state of many different cultures and backgrounds, and just the other day, the vice president of the Navajo Nation came out and supported the president of the United States for re-election. The Navajo Nation, the Native American communities were the hardest hit by the COVID pandemic on the early onset of it in this state, and the president came to render aid like never before to these communities. There's a lot of forgotten communities, and New Mexico has a bunch of them.
The racist?
Navajos being one.
The racist came down there to help Native Americans battle COVID? Wait a minute. The guy who completely mishandled COVID and did nothing but sit on his hands and is responsible for 170-some thousand deaths in America? Single-handedly, by the way, responsible. You're telling me that he came down there and said, wait a minute now. This has got to be BS. I'm going to have to fact check this. And what I'll do is I'll go to Politico to fact check it, or maybe Snopes, and then I'll get the answer that this is mostly false, because we all know there is such a thing as something being mostly false. No, it's either a lie or it isn't. Okay? And the truth of the matter is...
Let me correct you, Stu. He didn't physically come here, but he fought and improved funding to deal with the COVID crisis.
Sure. And as a result of that, this group of people is now... They are advocating for the president. They are endorsing the president.
That's right.
And not only as a result of that, but moreover, probably as a result of his policies in general and how he has been indisputably one of the best presidents in the history of our nation for minority people and immigrants. You're never going to hear that in the mainstream media. I was reading that 3% of businesses are going away weekly in New Mexico. That's devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, we're losing 3% of our restaurants weekly due to the continuation of New Mexico's public health order under Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. And, just to kind of paint a picture for that, her administration had set gating criterias. And those were basically just thresholds that New Mexico had to meet as far as daily infection rates, etc., before some of these restrictions would ease up. About a couple months ago, she lifted some of those restrictions and then reapplied them because the values were changing. We've met that gating criteria now for over a week. She came out last week and said she's not going to change anything for at least another 3 weeks. The GOP in the state has, sent her letters demanding that we start taking action to restore our economies and get New Mexico back on track. We're in a world of hurt. And, it's not just her actions, but you can see these things being echoed. We lost New Mexico's finance secretary. She's resigned. The New Mexico Secretary of Health has said that she's going to stay on for a little bit until a replacement can be found, and she's resigning for personal reasons. The chief epidemiologist for the governor's office has also resigned. So you can see all these people starting to jump ship, and you have to wonder why, because it's extremely convenient timing.
Well, it seems like they're all just trying to run away from the governor. I suppose I wouldn't want to be connected to that either if I'm trying to, foster a career in whatever it is that these folks are doing.
Or just be about something. When you see an abuse of unilateral authority and you're a part of that system, at some point you're going to be on the right or wrong side of history. And your governor is going to be on the wrong side of history. When the dust settles and this whole thing is over with, people like her, people like Lori Lightfoot, people like Mayor Jacob Fry in Minneapolis, people like Tom Evers in Wisconsin, people like Governor Walz in Minnesota, and the list goes on and on with all of these liberally run Democrat, plantations is what they are. And they're socialist regimes, little miniature socialist regimes that are abusing their power. And it's going to come to light. And that's what I was saying about the message of positivity from the RNC. The rhetoric is completely different during the Republican National Convention, as these people are actually giving a picture of hope, a picture of unity, a picture of putting America back together, an actual plan to do it. And then at the same time, while the First Lady is speaking, you get people like Bette Midler tweeting how she still can't speak English, and some other comedian who I'm not even going to mention saying F that B. This just shows that the party of tolerance is anything but that. And they're not about immigrants. They don't care about immigrants. And they're not about black lives. They don't care about black lives. They care about themselves and their political aspirations. Brett, I got about a minute left. I'll give you the final word.
So, I think the biggest thing is that Democrats don't need to switch their parties. They just need to look at how these things are affecting them at home and their daily lives and their businesses. And if you've always voted blue no matter who, maybe you should start thinking about that. You don't need to switch your parties. Just vote differently. Vote your values. Vote your conscience. And vote for the America that you want.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, and I'm sorry for filibustering a lot of this. I'm pretty good at doing that. And Richard, poor guy, he probably had a list of questions for you over there, and it's for that reason that we'd like to have you back sometime. Are you down to do that?
Oh, let's do it. It's always a good time on the show. I love it.
We got to talk about your projects, too. A lot of great things going on down there, and I'm going to put some links to that on our social media as well, because I was looking at the and give your website again.
It's darenm.org. And that's where we're sharing the stories of hardship across New Mexico, and I'm sure those stories are very similar across the country.
Sure. And I was watching a couple of those. They're like 1 minute and 3 second videos on there of real New Mexicans going through hardships that, like you said, are very synonymous with things that are going on across the country. So, and here we go again with this crap. All right. It's just time to get out of here, Richard. I don't know. What's your final word, buddy?
I don't know. I'm just taken back by all the shit from the last couple days.
How profound.
See you tomorrow.
How profound. All right. And until tomorrow, this is all his fault.
Defund intern boy.
Defund intern boy. Until tomorrow when we see you on the OpsLens app and when you hear us on iHeartRadio, Mojo 50 Radio, here's what's up to it. Here's what's down to it. Here's to any way you can get to it. Here's to those that don't do it. May they be dragged to it, tied to it, or forced to it. And here's to us who do it because we're the ones that's used to it. Remember to fly low and avoid the radar. Listen, one day they're going to come for the car. And when they do, save the radio!
Stucci, but they'll have to do. The low-budget answer for your deranged listening habits. Stu and Rich. Patriotically correct radio.